Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. This is Todd with Industrial Comfort. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make these zipper spline box corner joints. Now these splines do not add any structural integrity to the joint, it's more decorative, but it'll certainly make your box corners look pretty awesome. So let's get started. The first thing that we want to do in creating this joint is to put the inlays in place. And you want to do this before you make the miter and join the two pieces of wood together. Now, in this case, what I'd like to do is put in 6 splines. So what I'm going to do is put 3 on each board and stagger the boards to get that zipper-like effect. So what you need to do to determine the exact location is divide the width of the board by the number of splines plus 1. So this 3.5 inch wide piece of wood will be divided by 3 plus 1, or 4, to give me 7/8 of an inch. So I've got my calipers adjusted already to 7/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is mark that on my piece of wood here, and I'm going to use my speed square just to create some more visibility here. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this piece of wood. Okay, so I've got the lines marked on the board for where I'll be making these cuts. Now, because I'm going to offset these, I want to ensure that the splines are equidistant from one another. So I'm now going to mark the midpoint between the edge of the board and this first line here, which is going to be 7/8 of an inch divided by 2, which is going to get me 7/16. Okay, lock that on my caliper and I'll make the mark. And again, I'll just accentuate it with another mark with my speed square here. Okay, so we've got this offset line. So what I'm going to do now is put these two boards one behind the other with the edge of this board lined up at about, and I'm just going to do this by eye, 1/16 of an inch away from that line that we just drew. And the reason I'm doing this is because as the blade passes through, we need to account for the kerf of the blade. And so that's why we're going to leave a 16th, because the kerf or the width of the blade is about 1/8 of an inch, or it is 1/8 of an inch. And then what I'll do is I will set it down here on the slide. I'll take a clamp and clamp these two boards together. Okay. Now, what I'm next going to do is put these two boards in my crosscut sled here, and I'm going to line it up so that the cut is going to pass right before the edge of this board. Now, you don't want it to cut the board, so again, just leave a hair between the cut line and the edge of the front leading board. And then I'm going to take another clamp and clamp it in place. Now we'll go ahead and make the cuts. Couple things to keep in mind before we make the cuts. The first of which is blade height. So I am personally choosing, as a rule of thumb, to go half the thickness of the wood. So this is this is 3/4 of an inch. So I go 3/8 of an inch. Now, because we're going to be cleaning this up before we actually make the miter cuts, it kind of doesn't matter how deep you go. In other joints, you want to make the cut, you never want to cut all the way through the joint, or you're going to have a mess on the inside of the corner or the box. So we'll go ahead and we'll cut on each of these 3 lines, and then when we're done, we'll put them together and you'll see the offsets. Okay, with the cutting now done, you can see here that we've got, oh actually, look at that. We ended up with 7 because of the offset. So you can see here that when we put the corner in place, we're going to have an offset zipper type pattern because these are offset from one another. So next step, we're going to go ahead and cut the spline material from this table saw. If you've seen any of my other videos, you probably remember the technique I use for cutting the splines that we're going to ultimately end up putting into this joint. To do that, what I'm going to do is line the slide up so that I'm cutting off just a little sliver on the end of this piece of wood. Now I call this my sacrificial cut because this will give us a perfect reference point to then back the fence into the blade to create the 1/8 inch of material that we need for the spline. Now in order to do that after we cut the sacrificial piece of cut here, I'm going to move the fence over by 1/4 of an inch. Now the reason I do that is because the kerf of the blade is 1/8 of an inch, which will then in turn leave us with an 1/8 inch of material in the end. So every time you make a cut, you're going to want to move it over another 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to make a few of these cuts because I'm going to need a little bit of material to make these 7 splines. Now, a little pointer is to, when you make the sacrificial cut, you want to make sure that you're falling on a notation on the slide here that's exactly on a gradation that's going to make it easy to back into 1/4 of an inch each time you need to make the move. I've taken the pieces that we just cut and cut them further so that I had smaller splines that we could put in place. So I'm going to coat these with glue and begin the process of working these into the slots here. Now the fit is usually fairly tight, so I like to kind of hammer these in for good measure to get a nice seat. Okay, I don't really care about the excess glue because we're going to be doing a bit of sanding when we're done, so. Alright, we'll let these set up and dry and we'll be back to finish the joint. With the glue now set on these splines, I'm going to use my miter saw here to make 2 45-degree cuts exactly at the corner of each piece of wood. After the cuts are made, you may want to clean up the backside as there's some residual glue and in some cases a little bit of the wood might be sticking up. So I'm going to give this a quick sand before we put it into the miter jig for glue up. Okay, with everything now cleaned up, I'm going to use this jig to clamp these pieces of wood together to make the miter joint. Now, if this wasn't for demonstration purposes, I'd be running a piece of masking tape along the inside of this joint here to prevent any leakage from the glue up. It just makes things a lot easier to clean up in the end. So what I like to do first is give this a nice test fit, and then I lock one side in place, and then I'll apply the glue and clamp everything together. All right, we'll let this set up and we'll come back for final sand and finish. With the glue now dry, I'm going to take out of the clamp and I'm going to sand down these remaining pieces of wood. Now, if you have a bandsaw or a belt sander, that's probably the quickest way to remove the extra material, or you can just use your random orbital sander. Now, I'm going to sand to at least between 220 and 240 grit. Then I'm going to apply a nice coat of probably mineral oil in this case, just to get it done real quickly, and we'll take a look at the finished product. With a light coat of oil, this is what our zipper box joint looks like. I hope you found this helpful. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.